Here is my movie review for The Slime People, which came out in 1963. I watched this one on YouTube. The Slime People is a piece of mid-century media that doesn't do anything special, but isn't offensive. It's a movie that lives with the schlock you would stereotypically see in the same movie with a character that was into the trope of like a 50s type monster movies, So, how like there's, I don't know, like a movie like The Sandlot or something and it's based in the 50s and you have like the character that loves the crappy monster movies. I feel like The Slime People would be the crappy movie that character would like. You know what I mean? Anyway, movies, though, of this time period had a typical formula with the middle-aged white male main character, probably so that men of this era could place themselves in the roles of these movies. The main character was a TV sports anchor named Tom. He was flying his own plane, then was told on the radio to avoid LA. He believed it to be a terrible, he believed it was a terrible storm. Not that, something supernatural was going on. And when he landed, there was no one around, and the telephone booth was dead. He is then met by the other three main characters of the story, the professor and his two daughters, Bonnie and Lisa. They approach in a car, all creepy-like, actually, like as if they were gonna murder him. They invite him into the car and start telling Tom what happened. And funny enough, they weirded out Tom at first. He actually asked to be dropped off on the side of the road, but they reassure him that everything was real. And easily, he actually believes it. And there's one thing I found funny with this movie, which is how every character is written in a very agreeable manner. Like someone just tells them something and they'll believe it. I guess that this was because they needed to save time, as the movie was relatively short and only an hour and 17 minutes long. I like how the movie was actually rather straight to the point and quickly, got to the point of the movie. Sort of, I guess, but when it came to the plot, it sort of just fell short. It was almost a non-issue what was happening in the city. The reason why there wasn't anybody in town is because the people of Los Angeles were told to evacuate due to a subterranean species of creatures dubbed the Slime People, and had started appearing above ground, causing a thick fog, which lowered the temperature, which allowed them to stay out longer and kill people, I guess. The professor's idea was that the humans of LA had polluted the ground enough. Looking at the synopsis, LA was... This doesn't make sense. LA was polluted because of nuclear testing, and so the nuclear testing underground polluted the slime people's homes. But thinking back in this time period, like the Manhattan Project, like all that nuclear testing was not in LA. Anyway, it was like in New Mexico in the Bikini Atoll. Anyway, back to the review. See, it's already falling apart. It doesn't make sense, So, oh God, I lost my place. I wrote it down. But yes, he said that the humans had polluted it. They polluted the ground enough, and that it made living underground unbearable, so if not impossible, for the underground to slime people. So really, the Slime People were coming above ground to act out revenge on those that ruined their home. And so they created this wall or dome of fog that eventually made it impossible to leave because, to leave if you hadn't left already. And later it turns out that the fog was created by a machine that the slime people had. The plot of the movie turns from trying to briefly understand the slime people to trying to destroy the fog wall. The movie relies on the trope of having a scientist egghead that can easily calculate anything. Despite needing the time to figure out why the dome prevented people from leaving, the solution was easily solved by table salt. The professor came to the conclusion that simple table salt could destroy the fog because apparently the plane Tom operated was able to pass through the barrier in the beginning because he was so low to the ocean, and the salt water apparently destroyed the fog a bit. So the gang decides to look around town for salt, only getting a little bit, enough for what I thought in the movie they said was 2 buckets, but then when I looked it up later, I think IMDb said like 7 buckets, and I'm like, what? Either way, 2 to 7 buckets of salt water, which doesn't make sense either, right? You know, they had, why would they find salt? They're in LA. Couldn't they just go to the ocean and just get buckets that way? But, you know, obviously this doesn't make sense. So, anyway, no matter what, they didn't have enough for the whole city of LA. And so, as mentioned before, they find a fog machine and destroy it, and they save Los Angeles. The slime people die instantly, the ones that were outside, you know, above ground. And it all ends with the gang happily looking out in the distance, chuckling, giggling, and happy to be together. The movie is quite cheese, with how the daughters are the love interest to the main character and another member of the group named Cal. It's strange because it has no real progression to the plot, not saving the city in any way. In fact, this romance actually gets Bonnie kidnapped by one of the slime people, where they later have to retrieve her. The professor isn't involved in any romance, though, so I guess it appears that no one appears to love him. The movie completely ignores the fact that the slime people were coming up to the open earth because their homes underground were being destroyed by, you know, pollution. And so the movie doesn't come up with any solutions or real helpful way to stop this underground species from dying off. If anything, the destruction of the fog machine guaranteed that all the slime people would die, as those above ground can't fight, and the ones underground just waste away. So, while the main characters are happy and laughing at the end, the slime people are going extinct in the background. So, I'm pretty sure no one thought about that, though, when writing the movie. The actual slime people had interesting costumes, probably the best thing about the whole film. I bet that's where all the budget went, and apparently reading about it later on, it was. I wasn't really scared by them. The movie as a whole didn't scare me at all. The slime people were goobers, and they sounded like total dorks. It was more like giant lobster people were just stabbing people because they wanted to. Truly, the characters aren't very memorable, except the professor, in my opinion. Him and Tom were like wannabe versions of Vincent Price's character from The Last Man on Earth. The daughters were quite pointless. Cal, the other man, was pointless. And the random crazy guy that they picked up was pointless also. The only characters to do anything were Tom and the professor. The movie is just silly overall. I went into this blind, never having seen it before or knowing anything about it. As a movie, just a movie, yeah, it has a low score. If you take it seriously, it's not good. Granted, I kind of figured it wasn't gonna be good, considering, the title. I don't know how you could ever consider a movie called The Slime People to be serious. As a normal movie, yeah, I would give it 1 or 2 stars. 2 zombies. The movie is schlock, though. It's funny, stupid schlock. And great to just eat like popcorn shrimp to. And have as, the background for a Netflix and chill thing. Would I watch it more than once? Probably not. But I did enjoy some of the bad. The history of this movie is silly, too. Apparently, the film ran out of money after 9 days, and the cast went unpaid. The estimated budget was $56,000 in the least, which was a lot for 1962. Adjusted for inflation, that would be $574,319 in 2023. Still a lower budget movie, but actually ridiculous that they blew through it so fast back in the day. For reference, the characters in the movie pass by a grocery store, and you could get 3 pounds of potatoes for $1 and steak for 79 cents a pound. The movie was supposed to have a scene where dwarves were meant to appear as giant voles who would serve as the advance guard of the invasion. But it was so bad that it was cut from the film. And by dwarves, of course, I don't mean the magical versions, but of course people that have, a congenital disability, basically, which it's like even worse, it's like, oh, hey, let's take these people that have, a genetic condition and it just makes it so bad, right? I mean, at least they scrapped it. But I do wonder now that I'm reading back my review, if there were costumes for that scene that were already like paid for, which is where I wonder, maybe that's where part of the budget went too, right? Apparently, the film was also shot for $80,000, according to another statistic. So either way, the price range is stated to be between $56,000 to $80,000 for 1962. So I'm just going to round it to about $500,000 to maybe $1 million today. And so it's low budget, but it's still one of those things like, how did they blow through it? Anyway. So apparently the movie had 8 costumes worn by stuntmen, and each costume allegedly cost $600. Once again, where did the money go? Who knows? Now, on Wikipedia, which is where pretty much majority of these facts are coming from, it said that the original screenwriter was Vance Scarstedt, but it was rewritten by Joseph F. Robertson's wife, Blair. And why? It doesn't say why. I don't know, And I looked on IMDb and Letterboxd, and I didn't see anything about that. Like, why was it rewritten? Who was this guy's wife that decided to rewrite it? And why did they go with it? Like, it was obviously so bad. So, I have questions about this film that I couldn't find any more history on, unfortunately. So, apparently, though, in an interview with Robert Hutton, who was the guy that played Tom Gregory, he said that he nor any of the stuntmen were paid to work on the film, and the costumes for the slime people cost over half of the film's budget. So, like I said before, if we're talking about $50,000 to $80,000, then that would be more like $6,250 each for the slime costumes, which of course is crazy. That's insane. And there wasn't any information either. I tried to find, but I don't know who might have made those costumes. I'm not sure off the top of my head what film company this might have technically been processed through. So there's a lot of questions where I'm like, in the background, I just don't know. But anyway, because back in the 60s, I know that Universal and Paramount were still very, huge, right? I don't know. Anyway, I'm just going off the top of my head. But anyway, the original choice to play the professor was a different actor named Richard Arlen, but it was taken by actor Robert Burton. And Burton was the man that you would see in the movie. Unfortunately, though, he passed away from cancer shortly after filming. So, which really just sucks, especially when you consider that nobody was paid. So this guy was dying and he didn't even get paid. Like, Jesus Christ. The Slime People was the only film directed by Robert Hutton, who later wrote the script for the movie Persecution, which came out in 1975. And I think I'm going to watch that sometime later in the future, if I could find it anywhere, at least. But I tried to find more info on the movie, any background, and there's just really not much out there. And I looked through the newspapers of that time period also, and at least most of what was, archived and you can read online are just marquees, and they're just stating when and where the movie would play. And let's see, the movie came out in 1963, and so from 1963 to about, I think I looked through 1985 or so, through the 80s, all it was were just, ads of it. Never any, movie reviews. Which I think is kind of surprising considering the fact that, back in the day you would see movie reviews in newspapers, but maybe nobody wanted to watch it. But anyway, there's some trivia, though, on IMDb, which states that the scenes in the butcher shop in the freezer were filmed in an actual butcher shop that was owned by Robert Hutton's father-in-law. And because of the film's low budget, Susan Hart, who was one of the actresses, was given $35 to buy her own wardrobe. Only $35. Now, there's scenes of devastation, which apparently were actual footage of the Santa Monica Mountains after a wildfire had swept through the area. So that's great. Susan Hart didn't have to read for the role of Lisa Galbraith. She was automatically cast based on her looks alone. Apparently, the movie was featured on the show Mystery Science Theater 3000, and in the 1986 syndicated Scenes, the Cannes Film Festival. Which, funny enough, just the other day, at least at the time of this recording, blah blah blah, November 2023, I'd actually seen somebody streaming Mystery Science Theater 3000 on Twitch. I was like, hey, y'all are doing that? Anyway. But, well, actually, that's it, Beyond that, I have no idea what else can be known about this movie. And I'm sure that there is more info out there. Some of the excerpts, or at least trivia facts on Wikipedia, were sourced from some books. So there's some books out there that obviously mention this movie. But I don't know where else you could find info on, because I really am just dying to know, what happened to the money? Like, what did they do with it? Why was it rewritten by a totally different person? And why did they allow it to be rewritten and used when it was just so terrible? Anyway, it was pretty funny though. It was hilarabad, basically. Entertaining because it was so stupid. So from now on, I think when it comes to these movie reviews, and I have, like, I've watched like something crappy, I'm gonna add it to the schlock meter, you know? So something normal, something that's like actually supposed to be good, I'll rate on a scale of like 1 to 5 zombies or 0 to 5. And then if something is, schlock and crap and bootleg, it's gonna be on the slime meter, you know? 0 to 5 slimes. And I guess if it's something as 5 slimes, the slimier it is, the worse it is, Just extra cheese and trash. So, on just a regular scale, I guess I would give this 1 zombie, right? 1 out of 5. But on the slime meter, I think I would give it 2 slimes. It's not overly cheesy, but it's still pretty stupid. And even for how acting and movies were different in the mid-century, like, there you could see a distinct difference between 1960s acting and 1970s acting, right? And this is the end of old Hollywood. So for old Hollywood, I would say this is still garbage and trash. And so for me, 2 slimes. 2 slimes. Thanks.